During the reign of the Spanish Inquisition, women faced accusations of heresy, sorcery, or improper conduct that could lead to fates worse than execution. A simple allegation, often made by neighbors or clergy, was sufficient for condemnation. Evidence was unnecessary. Defense was unheard. Called La Suprema, the Inquisition functioned with merciless effectiveness. While initially created in 1478 by Catholic rulers Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile to eliminate religious dissent, it rapidly broadened its power. Women, especially those who strayed from social expectations, including healers, midwives, widows, and even vocal wives, faced disproportionate danger. Many faced charges of brujeria, sorcery, or devil worship. Once listed in an edicto de fe, a public proclamation of charges, the accused woman was seized from her dwelling, chained and imprisoned in dark, wet cells. She would remain for days or weeks, unaware of her accusations. Terror itself served as punishment. The inquisitors showed no compassion. They demanded confession, not facts. Torture was not simply allowed, it was systematized. Pope Innocent IV had authorized its application as early as 1252, and during the Inquisition, it became a calculated instrument of dominance. The goal was never fairness, it was surrender. To be a woman under Inquisition control meant being stripped of voice. Her flesh became the arena, her quiet an acknowledgement and her cries unavoidable. Strappado caused dislocation without bloodshed. The room was quiet but not motionless. Above, ropes squeaked through a pulley. This was the strappado, an apparatus seemingly basic in construction. One rope, a hook, and a ceiling support. No sharp edges, no fire. Yet among the most dreaded tools of the Spanish Inquisition. Accused women were presented to this mechanism, not for death, but for admission. Once condemned to torture, they were brought into the room, their hands tied firmly behind them. The rope was then threaded through the ceiling and secured to their arms. At the inquisitor's signal, the executioner raised them airborne by their arms exclusively. The shoulders supported full body weight, frequently causing serious joint injury and permanent physical damage. No blood flowed, no apparent injury. What made the strappado particularly brutal was its false appearance of leniency. In Inquisition documentation, this technique was labeled as a gentle form of persuasion. They claimed it produced no marks, but truth differed. Muscles ruptured, nerves sustained permanent harm. Arms could become forever disabled. Sometimes the torture intensified through sudden releases, lowering the victim briefly before yanking her upward again, increasing internal damage. Women who screamed were dismissed. Those who stayed silent were hoisted repeatedly. No precise figures exist for women who suffered the strappado throughout Inquisition centuries. Many documents were destroyed, or possibly never recorded. What remains are testimonies from few and silent memories of countless others. Inquisition chambers throughout Spain and its territories contained these instruments. Their employment extended from late 15th century into the 18th. For the Inquisition, this was not retribution, it was cleansing. But for accused women, many never proven guilty, it meant descending into anguish, imposed not by crowds or warriors but by a system believing pain could achieve redemption. The iron spider created suffering through flame. Its form was distinctive, extended curved metal limbs terminating in vicious hooks crafted not for holding but for devastation. The apparatus was called the iron spider, and its mere mention struck fear into hearts of women charged by the Spanish Inquisition. Created specifically for female subjects, it was a pain device disguised as questioning. The iron spider was usually attached to stone walls in cold, resonating chambers. Victims were brought forth, restrained, accused, and frequently already weakened by starvation, terror, or previous trials. Historical records indicate that inquisitors preferred body areas that would cause permanent shame or disability. The metal points, often preheated in flames, were placed against exposed regions. The intention was not extracting truth through reasoning, but forcing confessions through unbearable suffering. While documentation is limited, frequently deliberately destroyed or kept unclear, the iron spider was allegedly employed against women accused of heresy. unfaithfulness, or relationships considered impure by religious officials. Unlike more publicly visible torture forms, the iron spider created wounds that were not merely physical, but profoundly mental. Survivors, if any existed, carried mutilation serving as permanent evidence of their degradation. Yet these women never received genuine trials in legal terms. Inquisitorial tribunals functioned secretly, and guilt was frequently presumed once accusations were made. Perhaps the most disturbing element of this device was how intentionally it targeted women. The Inquisition, while publicly devoted to soul salvation, frequently targeted female bodies as symbols of temptation and sites of control. Devices like the iron spider were not random instruments. They were deliberate, ritualized acts of subjugation performed under religious pretense. The rack extracted truth from accused. Iron chains rattled as a woman's wrists and ankles were secured to opposite ends of wooden framework. Known historically as la tortura del potro, the torture of the colt, this device was basic in design but agonizing in operation. The woman was not yet guilty legally. She had only been accused perhaps of witchcraft, heresy, or devil association. Yet her body was about to become the battlefield for confession she might never have intended to give. The rack, as later called in English, consisted of rectangular wooden frame with rollers at each end. Ropes were fastened to victims' wrists and ankles. As interrogators rotated the rollers, sometimes gradually, sometimes with sudden force, the ropes would constrict, pulling limbs in opposite directions. The agony was constant, not intended to kill, but to break the spirit. This method was employed under Spanish Inquisition authority, known formally as the Tribunal del Santo Oficio de la Inquisición. Though the Inquisition publicly stressed spiritual correction over brutality, documents from that era, including Procesos Inquisitoriales Inquisitorial trial records, show its systematic dependence on moderate torture to obtain confessions, particularly from women. Many accused heretics were illiterate or unfamiliar with Latin, the language their charges were read in. Under such circumstances, the rack became not just a pain instrument, but a means of forced submission to both religious and institutional power. Women were particularly susceptible. Accusations of sorcery or moral violations, frequently based on rumors or local suspicion, could justify interrogation under extreme circumstances. Once secured to the rack, the accused was questioned repeatedly. If she denied guilt, the rollers turned further. If she confessed, it was often because her body could endure no more. Some chroniclers noted that confessions were followed by absolution and penance. Others were executed at the stake. The rack left no visible blood, but it destroyed lives. For the Inquisition, the rack was a quiet ally in its control mission, forcing truth not through logic but through breaking. The Pear of Anguish was a tool of quiet terror. She sat silently, her destiny determined behind thick stone walls of an inquisitorial chamber. There were no audiences, no formal tribunal, only dim torchlight and presence of a device known in later centuries as the Pear of Anguish. Though its precise origin remains disputed, this metal instrument is mentioned in several post-Inquisition accounts and later torture catalogs. Shaped like a pear and divided into segmented sections, the device was used in inquisitorial settings to punish individuals accused of various offenses. Depending on accusation nature, it was inserted into a body opening and then expanded by turning a screw, causing severe internal pain without visible injury. The device made of iron was not designed to kill immediately. It did not cause external bleeding, and the pain it caused was internal. When inserted into the mouth, it was often used on those accused of blasphemy or spreading heretical words. For women, however, its use was most frequently connected to accusations of moral violation, occult practices, or associations deemed spiritually corrupt. Its use, whether historically verified fully by contemporary Spanish Inquisition records or suggested from later legal and punitive manuals, reflected a disturbing combination of control, shame, and bodily violation. While not mentioned explicitly in core trial logs of the Tribunal del Santo Oficio, its classification among instruments of ecclesiastical torture in post-Inquisition collections suggests it belonged to the broader punitive culture shaped by that period. The Inquisition maintained that torture was to be applied without blood spilling. Devices like the Pear then satisfied the criteria, inflicting extreme pain yet leaving no open wounds. Its psychological impact was as severe as its physical one. The act of forced insertion was an assertion of dominance, especially in a system where moral purity was policed through ritualized suffering. It weaponized the body's own openings, its most vulnerable passages, to punish women, not only for what they did, but for what others claimed they represented. The judgment chair had spikes for the accused, known in later texts as the judgment chair, or sometimes the interrogation chair. This device was forged entirely from iron or thick hardwood and covered with hundreds, sometimes thousands of sharp metal spikes. These protrusions were deliberately positioned on the seat, backrest, armrests, leg supports, and even the footrest. Once seated, the accused, often a woman charged with witchcraft, heresy, or moral transgression, would be strapped tightly in place. Historical models of the torture chair appear throughout early modern Europe, but Inquisitional-aligned jurisdictions preserved its symbolism with special precision. The victim was forced to remain motionless. Iron bindings at the wrists, ankles, neck, and waist ensured that any attempt to shift weight to escape even slightly would press her skin further into the spikes. In some instances, the chair was heated from below with coals, turning pain into searing torture. The Spanish Inquisition did not always list specific devices by name in its official archives. However, accounts from regions under inquisitorial influence, particularly in Aragon, Castile, and the Kingdom of Naples, reveal the use of silla de interrogar, interrogation chair, as a method of prejudicial coercion. It was intended not to kill, but to extract information, force confession, or soften the will before further questioning. Once strapped into the judgment chair, the accused was asked to confess. Refusal meant hours, sometimes days, of restrained agony. The judgment chair did not declare guilt. It merely made resistance unbearable. In the eyes of the inquisitors, that was often more than enough. The Spanish Inquisition weaponized fear, faith, and flesh to enforce obedience, not only through execution, but through instruments that redefined the limits of human suffering. How did religious courts justify torment in the name of salvation? Comment below. As Johann Weyer, a 16th-century physician who opposed witch trials, warned, "The cruelty of these men is not less than that of the tormentors of the martyrs."